Jaya Jaya Ramakrishna Bhuvana Mangala. Jaya Jaya Ramakrishna Bhuvana Mangala. Jaya Mata Shama Sutta Ati Niramala. Jaya Mata Shama Sutta Ati Niramala.
Good morning, everyone. Today is a special day, the birthday of Swami Adbhutananda, so I thought I would speak about him today. Our Vedanta philosophy is such a transcendent, universal, absolute, impersonal philosophy that we sometimes forget that what holds everything together is personality. And we see that not only with Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, but all of the direct disciples. I always feel something special about the shrine because all of the disciples are here. They're all sitting here watching us, worshiping with us, meditating with us. So it gives a very special type of atmosphere. And really, this is our family. It's good for us to know something about all the direct disciples. Every once in a while, someone will ask me, why don't we put the names of all of the direct disciples there? So I was thinking, first of all, casual people, it won't mean much to them. And then our own devotees, they should know who they are. That in your own home, if you have pictures of your parents and grandparents and children and grandchildren, will you put names underneath all of them? Huh? We should have this close, intimate relationship with all of the direct disciples, and so that we see their pictures, automatically we know who they are, we know about their lives and everything. So it's good for us every once in a while to spend a little time, no deep philosophy today, just on the lives of some of the direct disciples. Sri Ramakrishna, sometimes we say that he was Sarva Bhavamaya. He was the embodiment of all different spiritual moods and attitudes, and we see it reflected in all of his disciples. All of them had a little something special about them. You know, I like this image. We read in the Kathopanishad of Yama giving the necklace to Nachiketa with all different gems in it. So this Swami Adbhutananda, Latu Maharaj, we call him, Latu Maharaj, will be the uncut diamond. This will be the one gem that was never polished, that always remained simple and plain. That was the special feature of Latu Maharaj. All of the disciples had something special about them. They all represented one particular element or aspect of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Some of them more than one, of course, in many different ways. But Latu Maharaj was unique in that sense that of all of the other direct disciples, he was the one who had no education, was so simple, in many ways the closest to Sri Ramakrishna. We read all of the time that Swami Brahmananda was the one who resembled him most with his spiritual moods and everything, but in terms of the background and everything, simple village boy, he was the one who was closest to what we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. Never polished, he didn't know the ways of society, wasn't educated by all of the other disciples, almost all of them, were highly educated. Whether they had a lot of schooling or not, they went to missionary schools, knew English, had a good, almost all of them. But this Latu Maharaj, he was so simple that he never had the chance to learn how to be clever or duplicitous or polite to the world. He just was himself. So that was the beauty of Latu Maharaj. So really the wonder of Latu Maharaj was how, being so different from all of the others, without having that advantage of even being able to read and write, how he achieved the heights of spirituality. I forget one of the direct disciples, maybe Swami Turiyananda, he said that he's the greatest among all of us. We at least can spend our time with read the scriptures and other things like that. He doesn't even have that advantage. He simply has to keep his mind dwelling on God at all times. So this was really the wonder of Latu Maharaj. Really a very, very special soul. Sri Ramakrishna had a little more education than Latu Maharaj. It was a very funny thing that Sri Ramakrishna, who could barely read and write, one day decided he'll try to teach the Latu Maharaj the alphabet. See, he was an orphan boy. When he was 5 years old, both parents died. And you will hear about that. But so he couldn't read or write. So 3 days, Sri Ramakrishna tried to teach him just the alphabet, and they never got beyond Kagha, the first couple of letters, something like that, so they both laughed and gave up. So he never learned to read or write, but yet had such deep wisdom that many of the other direct disciples would really bow to his understanding of things, to his wisdom of things. Swami Vivekananda used to call him Plato instead of Latu, just because teasing him, but also admiring that simple wisdom that Latu Maharaj had. We don't know very much about his early life or anything. We actually don't know when he was born. If you look at the dates for all of the direct disciples, you'll see there's nothing there, only that he passed away in 1920. We were guessing today that probably he was maybe 4 or 5 years younger than Swamiji and Swami Ramananda and that group. That would have made him one of the youngest of the direct disciples, if not the youngest. And he didn't like to talk about himself. If people asked too many questions, he would get a little bit annoyed. But we have a few stray facts, so we know a little bit about his early life. He was born in the village in the Chapra district in Bihar. We now have a center there. And he was given the name Rakturam, which I'm guessing was from Rakshatu Rama, that may Rama protect me. Something like that. It has that type of meaning. And after he came to Kolkata, he started to be called Latu. So that's how we know him. Sri Ramakrishna would sometimes call him Leto, Noto, all different types of things. The name got twisted around a lot, but mostly there's Latu Maharaj is how we know him. Both parents died at a very young age. He was only 5, and he had an uncle who had no children of his own. So there's an uncle raised Latu Maharaj, and with a very simple, carefree life in the village. Something like what we read about Sri Krishna gazing the cattle and everything. Just a very carefree type of life. Simple village life, looking after the cattle and grazing them in the fields. But he had a habit every once in a while of just taking off and wandering. And this is something that kind of stayed with him throughout his life, that he just would be gone. And his uncle would have no idea where he was. They'd have to search here and there, this place, that place, and they'd find him just carefree, not thinking about telling anybody or anything. So this was the nature of Latu Maharaj from a very young time. His uncle was a little bit better off than the rest of the family, than his parents were, but he also had a tendency to spend too much money. So he got in trouble, just as Swamiji's father had gotten in trouble, and he had to sell his house and possessions in the village to pay off all of his debts, and then decided to go to Kolkata, a very common story. We hear this was also what happened to Sri Ramakrishna with his elder brother, Ram Kumar. They had to go to the big city to look for work. So they went to Kolkata, and of course Latu Maharaj went with them, and one of the villagers from that same Chapra district had gone to Kolkata earlier, and they contacted him, and through him, this uncle got a job with Ramchandra Datta in his medical office. He, of course, was one of the main householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, one of the earliest to declare Sri Ramakrishna an avatar. And he was also a cousin of Swamiji's. He and Narendra were related through Swamiji's, through his mother. So all of these connections were there. And at that time, we're guessing that Latu would have been around 14 or something, 15, early young teenager, something around that age. He was working just in the house as a servant boy, running errands, doing all sorts of different shopping for the family, looking after the children. He would take them to the park, they would play, and all of these different things. And he would take Ramchandra's lunch to him at work. So just all different types of errands. And sometimes would get in trouble for his frankness. He was just very open and simple. He would say whatever was on his mind. But Ramchandra really took a liking to him. He began to love him very much, and he had tremendous faith in his character. I think there was an incident once where somebody accused him of not giving back all of the money or something. Ramchandra said, "No, it's impossible with this boy. He's so simple that it's impossible for that." This is a little off the subject, but it reminds me of a nice story I heard, I think, from Swami Gautamānandaji, when he was working with the tribal boys. You remember the story? A very nice story. That one day he thought he'll teach them not to tell lies. So he was telling them that if something happens and you say that it didn't happen or it happened in a different way, this is telling a lie, you should never do it. And these village boys, they were confused. They had blank expressions. So finally one of them said, "Why would we say it happened if it didn't happen?" It didn't understand the concept of telling a lie. It's so simple. And the Latu Maharaj was like that also. We know the personality of Ramchandra Datta, that all he could think about was Sri Ramakrishna, all he could talk about was him. So he naturally spoke to this young Latu about him constantly, and this tremendous longing came for Latu to meet Sri Ramakrishna, and this longing for God realization. Both of these things seem to develop at the same time. And they say that sometimes he could be seen weeping for God. This is a young boy with no real religious training or anything like that. He would cover himself with a blanket, and this was a habit that we'll see later in life he also had. So finally, after requesting many times, he convinced Ramchandra to take him along with him to Dakshineshwar one day to meet Sri Ramakrishna. And this is sometime around 1880. So now this is just when all of the monastic disciples are starting to come. The Narendra, or Swami Vivekananda, Rakal, or Swami Brahmananda, they all came 1881. And after that, 82, many of them came during that period. So he was one of the earliest to come. So Ramchandra Datta, he agreed, he brought him there. And Sri Ramakrishna, we know that he could size somebody up instantly. He would recognize people. He would recognize them if somehow they belonged to him. He would say that they belong to this place. So this was the case with Latu. The first time he saw him, he said to Ramchandra, "Ram, did you bring this boy with you? Where did you get him? I see some holy signs in him." Then he started talking to the Latu about this Nitya Siddha. This is one of the terms that Sri Ramakrishna used, those who were born perfect. Now, of all of his direct disciples, sometimes he made distinctions that a certain number of them, he called them Ishwarakotis. They're very special that they came, every time the avatar comes, they come. But in general, he would refer to all of his monastic disciples as Nitya Siddhas. Sometimes he would just say, "These boys that you see," without pointing anybody out. I don't make a big distinction. Of all the direct disciples, do we say those who were called Ishwarakotis are somehow superior to the others? To me, it doesn't make too much of a difference. To be born perfect is good enough. And we don't know how one becomes an Ishwarakoti. These are kind of mysterious types of things. But anyhow, he was talking to him, I'm sure triggered by the idea that he felt that Latu Maharaj was also one of these Nitya Siddhas. He said to him, "The knowledge of those who are ever free souls only needs to be unveiled, as it were. They are like underground springs which remain covered until a stonemason digging in the earth removes a particular rock. Then the water begins to flow." Now, Sri Ramakrishna, whenever he found one of these special future disciples to come, he had his tricks. Usually he would do something, touch them, say some special thing, stroke the body. He had little tricks that he would do. So he touched Latu, just in a simple way. He didn't have to do much. He touched him, and Latu went into an ecstatic state. His whole body began to shake. Tears started coming down his eyes, and they say it lasted for about an hour. You can imagine, a full hour, until Sri Ramakrishna touched him, and he slowly regained his normal consciousness. So gradually, Latu would be begging Ramchandra, when will you send me again? Because he would do little errands also. He would take things from Ramchandra's home to Dakshineswar. So he kept asking him, when will you send me? And the visits began to get more and more frequent. Then an event took place in 1881. We know this whole story about Hridoy, how Hridoy had to leave. Hridoy was Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, who was his main attendant at that time. It came into his mind somehow to worship the little daughter of Trailokyaнаth, who was the son of Mathur Babu, so the grandson of Rani Rashmani, so this would be the great-granddaughter, to worship her as a Kumari Puja type of thing. Now, they're from a lower caste, and Hridoy is a Brahmin, so it was considered very inauspicious, very unlucky for the little girl, for a Brahmin to worship her that way. So they got very upset, furious, you can say. And this Trailokyaнаth, when he first heard about it, he said, kick him out. And it's a well-known story because whoever was supposed to kick him out also told Sri Ramakrishna to leave. And Sri Ramakrishna, he said, okay. He took his gamcha and threw it over his shoulder and started to walk away. And then when they found out, they said, go back and tell him it's not you. So they went back and said, oh, sorry, it was just Hridoy, not you. He said, okay, and he went back. Complete indifference. Where he would go, nobody knows or anything. But in any event, Sri Ramakrishna was without any personal attendant because Hridoy had to leave. So at that time, Ramchandra Datta, he sent Latu Maharaj to stay with him. And Sri Ramakrishna was very happy, and then he said, please let him stay permanently. So Ramchandra, of course, agreed. Anything that Thakur wanted, he would do willingly. So this was a great period of service to Sri Ramakrishna, but also spiritual practice. This, of course, is a training period. All of those who stayed and lived with Sri Ramakrishna, he would be very careful to give them instructions on meditation and spiritual life in general. So this was a very important period for Latu at that time. There are a lot of interesting stories during this period. One day, Latu was going to Dakshineswar. He would go on foot mostly, and he passed a wine shop. There are many wine shops in those days. And he began to feel a little bit restless, reeling a little bit. He didn't know why exactly. And he told Sri Ramakrishna. And Thakur said that it was probably the smell of the wine. So he said better to avoid that. So then they found that every time he went from Ramchandra Datta's house to Dakshineswar, it would take about twice the amount of time. So I asked what happened. And it turned out that he had this way of going, so he avoided every possible street that had any type of wine shop on it. So instead of 4 miles, it was an 8-mile walk. So then Sri Ramakrishna said, no, my child, you don't have to do that much. Just don't go close to it so you get the smell of the wine. But it shows how simple he was. And everything Thakur said was really holy gospel to him. That the slightest word, and that was it. No question. He was the opposite of Narendra in that way. Both of them had their own type of Shraddha for Sri Ramakrishna. For Swamiji, that Shraddha meant, no, I have to understand everything that he says. That I'll question and examine it. Not that he had any disrespect or anything, but for Latu Maharaj, it meant whatever he said has to be the final truth about everything. His devotion was so great that when he lived with Sri Ramakrishna, when he woke up in the morning, Thakur had to be the first thing that he saw. He would call out, are you there? If he wasn't there, he would cover his hands with his eyes. And Sri Ramakrishna knew that. So whenever Latu would call, he would come running so that he could open his eyes. That would be the first thing that he would see, Sri Ramakrishna. So this was that tremendous devotion that he had. One of the other very important incidents took place when Latu happened to be sleeping at an odd hour. It must have been her evening, something like that, and Sri Ramakrishna called for him, and somebody said, "Oh, he's sleeping." Maybe, who knows, maybe 8 o'clock at night, something like that. Some odd hour. And so they woke him up, and they brought him to Sri Ramakrishna, and he got a big scolding. He said, "If you sleep in the evening, when will you meditate? You should meditate so deeply that the night passes unnoticed. Instead, your eyelids are heavy with sleep at this auspicious time. Did you come here only to sleep?" Maybe it was even just at sunset. Did you come here just to... So that was enough for Latu. Then he took a vow to himself that he would not sleep at night time. See, Thakur had said, so deep that the night passes unnoticed. And later he explained, "How can I express the deep sorrow that seized me at the Master's words? What a wretch I am, I said to myself, that having the rare blessing of such holy company, I should be wasting my time. I started to whip my mind. Mercilessly, I splashed water on my eyes and began to walk briskly along the bank of the Ganges. When my body became overheated, I returned and sat again. Again I dozed, and again I went out for a walk. Thus I fought the whole night. The struggle continued the next night also. It was a terrible fight. Sleep would overcome my eyes during the day, but I did not give up. The battle went on day and night. Finally, night sleep came under my control, but not day sleep. So he would take a little nap during the day, maybe once in the morning, afternoon. The whole night he would stay up. We know this partly because of another incident that took place at Baranagar Math. At one time, there were some rooms. Some of them had their rooms and everything, but in general, they all slept on an open area next to each other. And one night, Swami Swahananda, he heard a little tick, 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 tick sound. And he was thinking, what is this? Is there a mouse? So somehow he lit the lamp and looked around and didn't see anything. Then he went back to sleep, but he heard that same sound, tick, 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 tick sound. And finally he had some ideas. Very quickly he did it, and he saw Latu Maharaj was telling his beads. But he used to sometimes just lie flat on his back, covered completely with a blanket, so nobody would know. But a whole night he would be up doing that. So Swami Swahananda said, he told him, "You see, at night, that rascal Leto doesn't sleep at all. During the first part of the night, he pretends to be asleep and even snores. But he keeps his prayer beads with him, and when the others are asleep, he sits up and starts counting his beads. One night, I heard the ticking of beads and thought a mouse might have come into the room. When I gave a rap, the sound stopped. A little later, the ticks began again. This went on for a while, and I began to suspect that it might not be a mouse. The next night, I stayed awake and was very watchful. The moment I heard the first tick, I struck a match and found Leto sitting up counting his beads. Then I laughed. Ah, you want to surpass us all. While we're sleeping, you are counting your beads." We see, as with most of the direct disciples, so many examples of spiritual ecstasy and samadhi and everything in the direct disciples. Sri Ramakrishna used to compare them to very dry firewood, this tinder, that just strike of a match and the whole thing will go up quickly. Other people is like damp wood. You keep putting the fire there and it keeps going out. So he was like that anything could really trigger this type of spiritual experience. Swami Brahmananda, he related an incident that took place one morning in Sri Ramakrishna's room in Dakshineswar. Sri Ramakrishna had asked Latu to wake several of them that were sleeping in his room. We figured out the other day his room was 24 feet by 24 feet, something like that. So with the two beds there was plenty of room for several people to sleep there at night, and this very often happened. In very hot weather, they would sleep on the veranda, otherwise they would stay in his room. So several of them were in the room. Rakal stayed for a long time, Latu, Baburam, some of the others were there, that Harish. Anyhow, Sri Ramakrishna asked Latu to wake all of them up early for meditation. And he said to them, "Dive deep today, repeat the name of the Lord with great devotion." Then he began to sing, "Awake, O Mother Kundalini, awake." And he was singing and walking around the room and had all of them meditate on the floor. And then Rakal said, Swami Brahmananda, "All of a sudden, for no apparent reason, my whole body began to shake violently. At the same time, Latu let out a cry. The master placed his hand on Latu's shoulder and held him, saying, 'Don't get up, stay where you are.' I could see that Latu was feeling great pain, but the master refused to let him get up. After some time, I saw that Latu had lost all outer consciousness. The master was still singing the same song for more than an hour." There was another occasion when Latu was meditating on the bank of the Ganga, just by Sri Ramakrishna's room, and he went into a very deep state of meditation. And as he was meditating, the tide came in. And the water got higher and higher and higher, and practically about to cover his whole body. And he was unaware of everything. And Elder Gopal, later Swami Adbhutananda, he saw what was happening, and he ran to Sri Ramakrishna and told him. And Thakur himself went there and waded out into the water and brought back Latu until he came back to normal consciousness. Another experience from this time, during these Dakshineswar days. One day, Sri Ramakrishna told Latu to go to the Shiva temples. This was Sri Ramakrishna's way, that at different times he would tell them to meditate in different temples and give them different types of meditations to do. This particular day he said, go to the Shiva temple to meditate. And they found that Latu didn't come back even in the late afternoon, so Sri Ramakrishna sent Rakal to check on him. And they found him lost, motionless, and lost completely in meditation, whole body covered in perspiration. It's very hot in those things. Inside these Shiva temples are tiny little things. There's no air that goes through anything. So Sri Ramakrishna himself went with a fan and started fanning him. And he had Ramalal come and bring a glass of water. This is the servant boy who's supposed to serve Sri Ramakrishna. And Thakur was doing all of this for him. And they did this until they saw Latu's body began to tremble a little bit. That meant the mind was coming down. Then Sri Ramakrishna said to him sweetly, "My boy, it is twilight. When will you fix the lamps and light them?" So then Latu realized what was happening and tremendously embarrassed to see Sri Ramakrishna fanning him. Here, he's supposed to do service for Sri Ramakrishna. He had such an attitude of service, this Dasya Bhava, that it just struck him as such a terrible offense. He was allowing Sri Ramakrishna to serve him. But Thakur said, "No, my boy, it is not you I am serving, but the Lord Shiva within you. Did you know he had entered into you?" Then Latu replied, "I was gazing at the Shiva Linga and saw a wonderful light. I remember only that the light flooded the whole temple. After that, I regained normal consciousness." So hours had passed without his notice at all. The relationship that Latu had with Holy Mother was unique among all of the direct disciples, partly because he was probably younger and because he was such a simple, innocent village boy. He had access to Holy Mother that the others didn't. There's an incident that took place one day. Sri Ramakrishna had told Latu, you go meditate on Divine Mother. So he was there and several days, maybe spending his time mostly meditating on the Divine Mother. And then one day, Sri Ramakrishna said to him, look here, Leto, the one on whom you are meditating is now exhausting herself kneading flour for chapatis. So that means he's telling him that, look, there's a Holy Mother who's in the Nahabat, is the same as the Divine Mother that you're meditating upon, and you're letting her do all this work all alone. That you should do something to help her. So then he took Latu, the Holy Mother, and said, this boy is a pure soul. He will knead the flour and flatten the chapatis for you. Whenever you need any help, just ask him. So he's the only one. Swami Adbhutananda a little bit because he was so much older, but of the others, the only one who had such free access to Holy Mother and could see her unveiled. I'm sure just sitting inside that time that she would be unveiled in front of him. So he had that tremendous privilege, and that way he became part of a Holy Mother's household, you can say. Several stories are there about his relationship with Holy Mother. This is something which took place quite a bit later in 1907. Latu Maharaj was then staying at Balaram Bose's house. He actually lived in Balaram Bose's house for about 10 years. I think 1903 to 1912. And Holy Mother would also occasionally stay there. Before she had her own home, Udbodhan, she stayed in different places. Very often she stayed at Balaram Bose's house. Many of the direct disciples, Swami Brahmananda, he avoided staying at Belur Math during the rainy season because of malaria, so he would stay there. Swami Turiyananda stayed there very often. So many of them stayed. This is why this Balaram, we call it Balaram Mandir, is considered a very great place of pilgrimage, a very holy place. And Thakur, of course, stayed there many, many times. We hear that he stayed 100 times in that house at night. So we were many times there. Anyhow, so Latu Maharaj is staying in Balaram Bose's house, and Holy Mother was staying there. He's on the ground floor, and she's staying upstairs in one of the rooms. So one day, Holy Mother stopped in front of Latu Maharaj's room and said to him, Latu, my child, how are you? Latu Maharaj, still thinking of himself as that small boy who was Holy Mother's attendant and servant boy and everything, he got upset. He said to her, go away. You are an honorable lady. Why have you come to my own room to speak to me? Please go upstairs right away. I will not speak to you here. You could have sent for me. This is Abhiman. Huh? Why do you come to go to all that trouble? I would have gladly gone to you. You could have sent for me, and I would have gone to see you. I am your servant, you know. Then Holy Mother laughed and went to her room. Another similar type of story. This was when Holy Mother was about to leave for Jainabati. So naturally, a big occasion. Everyone will go to see her off and take the dust of her feet, get her blessings, all of that. Latu Maharaj remained in his room. Everyone's wondering. They know his behavior is a little bit odd, but everybody's wondering a little bit. And he, in the room, he's pacing back and forth and repeating, who is mother or father to a monk? He is free from all attachment and maya. Now, Holy Mother had gone downstairs, and she saw what was happening, and she heard what Latu had said. So she said to him, my child, it is all right if you don't accept me. Then immediately Latu Maharaj ran from the room, fell at Holy Mother's feet, weeping uncontrollably. Holy Mother also began to weep. You see this play? She also began to weep. Then Latu Maharaj, he took his own cloth and started wiping the tears from Holy Mother's eyes, and said to her very sweetly, you are going to your father's house. Please don't weep. You will return soon. So this tremendous devotion to Holy Mother is seen in Latu Maharaj's life. Also, tremendous devotion to Swamiji. They had a very, very close relationship and tremendous mutual respect for each other. The Latu used to call him this Loren Bhai, with his kind of village pronunciation of Naren. Thakur also used to use this type of word for nothing. Anyhow, he had tremendous love and devotion for Swamiji, and a very odd combination. One is an intellectual giant, and the other a completely unlettered, illiterate, we can say, young monk, but they had a great bond between them and a great mutual respect. Both had very deep, wonderful hearts and very compassionate and loving. They disagreed sometimes. Latu Maharaj didn't understand all of this preaching work in hospitals and things like that. He said, Thakur told us first realize God and everything, but still, this tremendous respect for Swamiji was there. All of them, even the ones who didn't quite understand the purpose of the Ramakrishna mission in the beginning, they all knew that Thakur was working through Swamiji. They all kind of accepted it, even though it took a while for them to really fully understand how Swamiji was really carrying out Thakur's wish. So when Swamiji came back from the West on his first trip, again, everybody went to see him, but Latu Maharaj stayed back. He had that habit. So he stayed back, and Swamiji noticed this. And later he went to find Latu Maharaj and said, all the others came, why didn't you come? And then he said, you have Western disciples now, men and women, I wondered whether you would remember me. And Swamiji called hold of his hand and said, you are my same old brother, Latu, and I am your same old brother, Naren. There's another nice story. When Swami Swahananda came back from the West, Latu Maharaj went to his room, and his feet were all dirty, he was dusty. He walked in, he sat right down on Swami Swahananda's bed and got dirt and dust all over the sheets and everything. Swami Swahananda, he never got upset about anything. That was the main distinctive characteristic, that he was so cool and calm about everything. So very quietly he said, oh, my brother Latu, what are you doing? Getting dirt all over the bed and everything. He said, oh, I just wanted to see if you got spoiled in the West. That you couldn't bear to see dirt and dust anywhere. So this was Latu Maharaj. At the time of Swami Vivekananda's passing away in 1902, Latu Maharaj was staying at that time also at Balaram Bosa's house, and everybody went to the cremation. Again, Latu stayed away. So somebody said to him, maybe one of his brother disciples, Maharaj, everyone went to Belur Math to see Swamiji except you. People made some remarks about it. Then Latu Maharaj replied, let them talk. Will their talk heal my pain? They do not know how much my brother Nadan loved me. I will miss his great love for me. His love for me was second only to the Master's, and now he is gone. After the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, all of the future young monks, they had no place to go. That ultimately they started the small monastery in Baranagar, later Kashipur, and Belur Math. And Latu Maharaj, of course, was part of this group. And at some point, they all went on pilgrimage. Latu Maharaj and Swamiji traveled together for a while. And he was so carefree and everything that when it came time to get the monastic names, Swamiji himself said he should be called Adbhutananda, that he said Sri Ramakrishna's greatest wonder, greatest miracle was Latu. So they gave him that name, Adbhutananda. And he was so free with everything that it was impossible for him to keep the type of routine and schedule that they had at Belur Math. Swamiji really wanted to have everybody get up early in the morning and do their meditation and everything. And even his brother disciples, Even I think once Mahapurush Maharaj or Swami Ramanand, one of them overslept, and he said, today you have to beg your food. This is the rule that we have. I'm sorry about it. But anyhow, he told Latu Maharaj said, I haven't reached that high spiritual stature where I can meditate just because the bell goes off. Now, the real thing was, of course, that he's staying up all night. Everyone else is sleeping. So how can he possibly do that? So Swamiji said, these rules aren't for you. He made a big exception, but he said no, that he didn't want to be there and have some exceptional rules apply only to him. So he lived in different places. He would just wander around. Sometimes he would just sleep on the banks of the Ganges. One of Thakur's disciples, this Upendranath Mukherjee, he had this printing press. Basmati, they were the ones who did Udbodhan. That he had that press. He would sleep there. They would say, why do you sleep there? The other people who worked in the printing press, they were rough types. They would drink and play cards and everything. He said, I like them. They're nice people. They were also simple and everything. So nobody knew where he would be, where he got his meals. Sometimes he would skip them. Sometimes he would just wander from one place to another. So they didn't really, this is the type of life that he led. There was a story that one day he found some empty, something like a boxcar or something like that, and he thought, oh, a nice place for meditation. So he got inside and he started to meditate. And while he was meditating, I don't remember if it was a train or something, but anyhow, it left. And he is not aware of it at all. He comes out of his meditation and gets out, and he sees some other place several hundred miles away. And so he walks back. That's all. It was nothing to him. This was just the way he lived his life. But he had tremendous natural wisdom. And one time when he was with Swamiji, they were in Khetri. And this Maharaja of Khetri was Swamiji's disciple and very, very much devoted to Swamiji. But this Latu Maharaj, he thought of, whoa, a very wise, brilliant person. He loved to talk to him. They would have deep conversations and everything. And then one day he was telling him something about different parts of the world, and he brought a globe out to show him with different places and everything. Now Swamiji knew, Swamiji was there also, that Latu Maharaj had never seen a globe in his life, wouldn't understand what it meant to see maps or anything. So he directed the conversation a little bit away from that so he wouldn't be embarrassed. But he had that other side, that very, very wise side to him. Once, Latu Maharaj was asked about the meaning of worship, just to show the beautiful advice that he gave. Do you know what worship is? Everything belongs to the Lord. So what is there to offer him? But Thakur used to tell us, once a rich man went to visit his orchard. He saw the gardeners busy with their work. The caretaker approached him and presented him with a ripe papaya, saying, Sir, I picked this ripe fruit for you yesterday. Please accept it. Now, the owner knows that the garden, the trees, the fruit all belong to him. But won't he appreciate the love and thoughtfulness of the caretaker? Worship is like this. One night, before he passed away in April of 1920, just a couple of months before Holy Mother. Somebody asked him, do you feel now the world to be a burden? And then Latu Maharaj said, look, when you dive deep into the Ganges, though there are thousands of pounds of water above you, you don't feel the weight. Similarly, if you plunge into God's creation, yet still hold on to Him, you will not feel its burden. Then the world becomes a place of joy. Latu Maharaj spent the last part of his life in Varanasi, and he passed away there on April 24th of 1920. And his final days were also very wonderful, that even with this last illness, he had some sore that turned into gangrene. But they say towards the end that he was constantly just in a deep meditative state, very peaceful, and he remained absorbed that way until that final passing. So we have this wonderful example before us of how it's not necessary to have tremendous learning and to know all of the scriptures and that this simplicity and frankness and this guilelessness nature, these are the things that Thakur thought were more important. And today I thought would be a nice occasion for us to reflect a little bit on the life of Swami Adbhutananda, Latu Maharaj. So let us take a few minutes and we can sit for meditation. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashantu Ma Kaschit Dukhabhag Bhavet. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. May all beings be happy. May all be free from disease. May all realize the highest good. May none suffer from misery. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto all. Next Sunday, Swami Brahmarupanandaji will speak on the first steps toward yoga. Then following Saturday the 18th, Shivaratri. So we'll have our puja here after evening meditation around 7:30. Everyone is welcome to come to that. And then the birthday of Sri Ramakrishna, the puja will be on the 26th. So everyone is welcome to join us, encouraged to join us. Now, before we go down for snacks, we'll have a final song, Dorjoy, that just showed up.
जमुना निर्मल पानी गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी शीतल होत शरीर चलो मन शीतल होत शरीर चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी शीतल होत शरीर चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर Today is Magh Purnima. People in India are taking bath in Ganga Jamuna to do special homage to gods. बंसी बजावत नाचत कान्हा बंसी बजावत नाचत कान्हा संग लिए बलबीर चलो मन संग लिए बलबीर चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर मोर मुकुट पीतांबर सोहे, मोर मुकुट, मोर मुकुट पीतांबर सोहे, मोर मुकुट पीतांबर सोहे, मोर मुकुट पीतांबर सोहे, मोर मुकुट पीतांबर सोहे। कुंडल छलकत हीर, चलो मन कुंडल छलकत हीर, चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर, चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर। मीरा के प्रभु गिरिधर नागर, मीरा के प्रभु, मीरा के प्रभु गिरिधर नागर, मीरा के प्रभु गिरिधर नागर, मीरा के प्रभु गिरिधर नागर, मीरा के प्रभु गिरिधर नागर। चरण कमल पर शीर, चलो मन चरण कमल पर शीर, चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर, चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर। गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी, गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी, गंगा जमुना निर्मल पानी। शीतल होत शरीर, चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर, चलो मन गंगा जमुना तीर।